and all is required is to follow certain procedure. Well, I know that a lot of times you might think that, oh, why it's not even easier than this? Why can't I just open application and magic happens and my application works in the new version, and at the same time all the features of the new version is available, and all my bugs which I had before in my previous version are fixed, and everything happened just by the click of one button. Well, you know, we would be glad if it would be this easy and this simple, and we are trying to do it every time with every release. We spend quite a bit of engineering resources, QA resources to achieve this goal. But let's face the reality, it's not as easy as it sounds because, well, when we create a new version, we change the code generation, we change the shared classes, we change different type of templates, we add new libraries, and all of this not necessarily completely compatible with what was before, especially if their before is longer than one release back. And that's why there could be certain situations when you need to follow procedure and make some additional efforts to make migration go smoothly. And today we'll talk what kind of procedure it could be and what efforts you would need to put to make it better. So let's start first with the simple question, why you need to migrate in the first place. Well, technically, this is a valid question, because if you have your application working and the customers or your users are able to use it, and it covers what you need and responds to all requirements, why would you change it? Why would you migrate to the later version? Well, there are several reasons for that. The first reason would be new features. Sometimes you might look at the list of new features, which you always can see at our page in the version history. By the way, I will be switching from my presentation to the different type of pages, help, live designer, to illustrate what I'm saying. So at that moment, for example, I'd like to switch to our website. Here's our website, and on the website you can always scroll and look at the version history to see new features for each release. For example, version 11, which was released recently, has certain features, and version 11.01, which was released just yesterday, doesn't have new features. It just has certain notes about certain bugs have been fixed. So if you want to know which are new features in the particular release, you can click right here on the feature list and look at the list of the new functionality available in this particular release. So new features in version 11, for example, include such things as ability to generate native mobile applications, ability to add infinite scroll pagination to your application, modal pop-ups which give you opportunity to open your page, such as, for example, show record page or add record page or edit record page or any other page for that matter, in the modal pop-up, which is pretty convenient when you want, for example, to keep your context page number 3, scroll down to the last record, and you want just to edit this record without losing your position inside the application, not scrolling back, not getting back to the page 1, for example. We also extended our page wizard with a bunch of new functionality, which allows you to modify properties of the specific controls globally, such as convert all my drop-down list to quick selectors or vice versa, or open all my add record page in the modal pop-up, and this type of things. We added new type of sort control, which allows to sort by several columns. We changed UI of the designer to make it a bit simpler and easier to navigate, and we improved performance of the designer. Well, if you already have your old application which is perfectly running, you might say, well, I don't care about new UI because I remember my old one. Performance of designer in this particular case is not a critical point because your application already generated, so you do not necessarily need to experience any performance of Iron Speed Designer itself. However, for example, ability to open certain pages in the modal pop-up on your existing application might be very useful, Or maybe you have a gallery page and you would like to have infinite scroll on this page to make it more user-friendly. So certain new features might be applicable. Another important thing is the bug fixes. Well, of course, before every release, when we do release, we at that moment are sure that we catch all the bugs, we fixed all the bugs, that nothing is left and it's completely clean. Believe it or not, every time we release, we invest months of testing of our code, and this testing covers all the aspects, everything, every feature, and we go back and forth, and we don't never release when there's some bug open. So we always think it's all done. However, again, this is a reality, and we are not alone in this world like this. Even Microsoft, when they release a new operation system, have then patches and fixes and the service packs, community fixes, and so on. We are not an exception. Sometimes some bugs get missed, and then we fix them later on. Well, our policy is not to go backwards. We consider our product in a sense as a subscription. So when you buy a designer license, although it may be perpetual license which is yours forever, we consider the experience of usage of Iron Speed Designer is kind of subscribing to our service in a sense. What it means is that we do not release patches of bug fixes for all the releases. We can sometimes, and it often happens, make a point release, such as, for example, 11.0.1, which we did release yesterday, which includes certain bug fixes. Sometimes it could be even 0.2, that happened before. But when we jump on the new generation, for example, from 10 to 11, or even from, let's say, 10.1 to 10.2, or something like this, that's it. We would not release point release for the backwards. We only can have point releases for the current, the latest, the very latest release. So if your application has been created in the previous major release, for example, let's imagine your application created in release 10.2, well, or 10.2.1, it doesn't matter, well, there will not be any more bug fixes for this particular release. Every bug fix, even if this bug happened in 10.2 or even earlier, will be included in the new 11th release. In fact, we fixed over 30 older bugs from the previous releases, and sometimes it's those bugs were going back like 5-6 years, not because we were reluctant to fix it before, but because nobody saw it before. We could not find it, and you didn't experience this bug. But sometimes it happens, and there were cases when one of our customers reported a bug which actually was back in the 6 different releases, and nobody saw it before, so we fixed it. So when you migrate to new release and you regenerate your application, certain bugs are taken care of, so you kind of solving the problems which you were struggling before. And yet again, if you look at our home page at the version history always has these release notes. And if you click on release notes, you can see the list of different bugs or issues which has been fixed for the particular release. And imagine that if your, for example, application is at that particular second is in the, for example, version, I don't know, 10.1, then all the bugs listed in all of these 4 release notes has been fixed since. And a lot of them was bugs introduced before or on the 10.1. So basically, that gives you more stable code and certain problems get released. Some of those bugs which were fixed are not really bugs, they are features, such as, for example, optimistic concurrency, which we implemented for inline functions. It was always the case for stored procedures, but now for inline code it's available as well. We improved cross-site scripting and the SQL injection attacks protection. Not that our code wasn't protected before, but there were certain tools which could report that certain hidden variable might technically be vulnerability, although it could not. However, all these type of reports now would be completely clean, but specifically taken care about that issue. new encryption algorithms, more reliable, less vulnerable, introduced, such as Regent-Dale and some others, and so on. Another reason to migrate is compatibility with latest software. For example, in the latest release, we included new development server, IS Express. Before, we have been using Cassini development server, and it's still used for frameworks such as 3.5, for example. However, in the latest framework, in the 4.5, Microsoft no longer supports Cassini development server. It doesn't ship it with the Visual Studio, and in fact, it doesn't work properly. So we added support for IS Express, which helps running development server in the 4.5 framework smoothly, and definitely will be important going forward to the next framework, which will be like 5.0. We use latest Ajax toolkit, which fixes certain problems in the latest framework again, make certain Ajax control work properly, improve different other aspects of the support for the framework 4.5. Added the latest libraries, such as, for example, MySQL DLL library, which works properly with latest framework. So all of that comes with the latest releases. Now, when we so that was the reasons to migrate, and now let's go to the next section, and the next section with how migration works. I specifically wanted to explain what do we do behind the scene, so you understand why do we need to take this or that action to make sure migration is smooth. So first of all, the important thing to understand that Iron Speed Designer migrates your application sequentially, meaning that it goes from each minor version to each minor version. With each release, and by release in this particular second, I mean the minor versions like point ones, such as 10.0.0, 10.0.1, 10.0.2, etc. With each of those releases, there are certain things taken care of, and the version number changed, and sometimes some other things are done. These things are done to fix the bugs or to introduce new features. Now, migration happens from version to version. Basically, all the actions for each of those versions in between would be efficiently taken. And if you migrate from version 9.2, for example, to version 11.01, everything, all the actions between 9.2.1 and 10.0 or 10.01, 10.02, and etc., all the way to 11.01 would be performed. So what are those actions? Well, I encourage you to read migration notes. Then you will see what are we doing. So, for example, let's imagine we are migrating from, well, 9.2 is way back. I don't want to read that much. Let's imagine that we're migrating from 10.1.0 to current 11.0.1. So what will happen? Well, let's look again on the version history page. So this is my 10.1.0. When we migrate to 10.2.0, oops, wrong click, this is not where I wanted to go. I wanted to go to online help and look at migration nodes. So online help, you can scroll down. Here is the application migration chapter 9. You click on the chapter 9, and here all the nodes. By the way, the very first section here, application migration, explains a lot of things which I will be talking today, so you can read it again. It will be more or less, in some details, maybe a bit deeper and some less, but it will be kind of also explaining what's happening when you migrate. But I want to kind of grab your attention to this section, migration nodes. So if I'm migrating from, let's say, 10.1.0, first we will do what? We will migrate the application to 10.2.0 first. We will update pagination controls, and we'll update web config. Then we migrate it to 10.2.1. What we will do then? We will update CryptoVB. Then we migrate it to 11.0. What will happen here? We will do all of those actions. We will replace base formula utils. Again, CryptoVB will be moved, and in fact it was moved to a different place into base classes. Sign-in state class has been replaced, sign-in page, set focus, etc. So all of those actions were taken. If I migrate from 9.2, it will also add everything what happened in between 9.2 and 10, or all of these things, then all of that, all of this, all of this. So that's how migration will go. It will first migrate your application to 10, then to 10.01, then to 10.02, 10.03, 10.1.1, and so on. Understanding that gives you kind of two things. First of all, you can look through these nodes and see what exactly happened. And for example, if you have customization in the, let's say, sign-in page, and you know that this page has been replaced, you need to reapply your customization. You have to expect that when you migrate, your security will not work the same way because simply we replace sign-in page. So you need to go back to your old application and put your customization back. Or, for example, if you added new formulas in the base formula utils or modified existing ones, well, you need to take care about that because you can see here base formula utils has been replaced, and so on. When you look at this even before migration, you can immediately see, oh, you know what, I did modify my forbidden page. So, okay, after migration, I need to take care about that. Or I think I had certain customization on my theme button. So look at that, and then you will kind of know where to look first after migration. You 100%, if you modified, customized any of those classes, this is a no doubt, 100% after migration, your application will not work properly just because your customization is lost. So look at that first. Then next thing, what we do is in every release migration, we update web config and update app.info XML. What we try to do, we always try to grab your existing settings in the web config, preserve them, and insert if it's needed or change values if it's needed of the specific keys or specific sections. Of course, sometimes it's simply not possible. So imagine that we need to, let's say, introduce new key. And you, yourself, introduce the same key before. You, of course, could not know that we will introduce this key in later release, and that somehow happened that you named the key the same way. Or, for example, we need to add a specific value to some of the settings in one of the sections in web config. And what if you set this value differently? So, of course, we had to override it in this case. So we recommend to look through web config to make sure that all the sections, all the values are intact. Similarly, we move the values in the app.info XML. This also called as application generation options. These are the options which kind of define how you generate application, how the pages are created, and so on. So we merge all the older sections with the new ones. Sometimes they are getting moved, so we move them across. Technically, nothing you can need to do about it, but you need to make sure that this file is not read-only. And this file will be overridden, and if you did anything manually there, which you should not, very possible those changes would be either lost or it will corrupt the file during migration. So never modify this file manually, and we always say that, but one of the reasons for that is that migration will not take this into account at all. Now, page styles migration. Well, first of all, when we migrate, we replace base styles CSS file always, and that's the reason why you need to put your changes in the style CSS, as we always say. Also, we need to make sure before migration that your new application, your new version of Designer has the theme with the same name as your old one. I will talk about that a bit later. And finally, we moved the images from Designer themes folder inside your application, but we don't overwrite your images. We just add the new ones if they happen to be there. We, during migration, replace certain files. We need to understand that there are two kinds of files, generated files and template-based files. So all the control and the code behind files or business or data access layer files which are not, which has a base prefix before them, they are generated. You can see this in the bottom of this slide. This is by generated, I mean that we use XML schema, which again you never should touch manually, and we generate VB or C# files or SPX files. On the other hand, such files as, for example, a base application page or, let's say, base table control, base record control, and a bunch of other files, which usually placed, or base formula utils for that matter, which are placed in a different shared folders, such as shared inside the root of your application, shared folder in the business layer, or shared folder in the data access layer. By the way, if your application is a website, you have two shared folders for the application, one of them in the root and one of them in the app code. Those files are actually copied over from the templates from Designer. And if we have to make any change in those files, usually we simply replace it. That means that if you modify these files, you can modify those files, you can customize them, and during the life of your application, your customization will be preserved. However, during migration, they might be lost if the file is being replaced. So you need to apply them back. And that's why we list in the migration notes, which I just showed. I'm sorry. You need to read these notes and see, oh, this particular file has been replaced, so I need to reapply my customization. Sometimes we have to replace master pages or menu or security pages. They are generated, and we try to preserve them, but sometimes it happens we need to put some different code into the schema itself. Why it's usually master pages? Because that's where you have all the directives, all the necessary scripts which could be used by something, all the kind of directives to the browser and so on. So when we need to do this, sometimes we pass the application during migration, sometimes we replace those files. Fortunately, there's only so many master pages, and they're pretty small, so reapplying your customization in this place is kind of easy. Occasionally, not often, but occasionally, we update our schema. For example, on the version 10.2, we updated schema to allow using same database or same schema with the same table names. We effectively changed how the schema remembers those. In this case, we need to regenerate schema completely. And again, we replace the schema files in this case. Usually we don't touch them, but that could be the case when we regenerate the schema. How we replace them? Well, we go to the database and literally generate the schema again. So that's regarding the files. And that's what we do. So basically, important things to remember from what I just said is that it migrates sequentially. You need to read migration notes for all the versions between your current one and the version you migrate to. Everything in between in migration notes will be performed during migration. Take care about the web config if you did any changes over there, and make sure that you understand which files have been replaced, so you apply your customizations. That's how it is. Now, let's talk a bit more about what to do. So we just covered how it happens. Let's see what to do. Well, first, and that's not that you need to take care about this specifically, but we need to remember that always backup. So when you start migration, and let me do exactly that. Let me go to my designer. Oh, this is version 10.1. So here, right now, version 10.1 application, which is live right now on the live preview. You can see that live preview is really live. You can click on different pages, buttons, and the application will respond to your actions. When it wake up, actually, it was sitting there forever, I think, since several days ago. But it's kind of normal live application. And now I want to migrate this particular application to my version 11. So first thing I do, I will close it because, well, we will be modifying exactly this application. So let's close it here in 10.1. And let's open this application in the version 11. So here's my version 11.01, which has been released yesterday. And now I go to File. But before I start migration, important thing is I want to be in the layout editor mode. And important for that, why it is important, because if I will be in live preview, it will still work, but it will immediately try to navigate. And as I will tell you right now, certain certain things might not be performed in the proper order. Nothing will really broke, but when it's navigated, it can show you some errors which will kind of scare you for no reason because it's just migration not finished. So I will make sure it's in layout editor, and then I will try to open my application which has been intended to run. So first thing, I will see my migration wizard. And in migration wizard, you will be prompted to backup. That's why I went here. So that's what it will say here. Never uncheck this checkbox. Let it backup. Every time you migrated, you might migrate several times to the same application. Let it create backups every time, new and new backup. You can type in your backup name to put them in special folder, but let it do it. It will be important. Now, before you start migration, before you even try to open this application, please make sure you remove your application from the source control system. Important that migration wizard should be able to overwrite files. In fact, it will try to do this even if they set read-only. However, so it will have, it does have a code inside to change attributes on your application. And if you're running migration wizard and designer with administrative permissions, it will reset your attributes on the files and make them not read-only and override them anyway. But you don't want to go to this trouble, what if your permissions are not exactly a full control or something less, or the folder where the application sits, you might not have full control over. In this case, designer won't be able to change permissions maybe for certain files, and they won't be written, and your migration will not go smoothly. So I would suggest you know that your application will be hugely changed. Your files will be regenerated. They will be replaced and so on. So just remove the whole application from the source control. Make sure it's not read-only. In fact, give everyone full control to the application before you migrate. That will help. Now, again, we still not open an application. We still have not went to the designer. We need to take care about page style. If you use one of our predefined page styles, you don't need to do anything which I will tell you now. However, often you modify your page style, and it would be much easier to do even with the new release, because we gave you opportunity right now to create the templates effectively, where your page style also encapsulates not the look and feel of the page in terms of styles and images, but also since starting version 11, your page style also has its own copy, unique copy of application generation options. So you effectively can change them, modify the way you like generate, include these buttons, don't include those buttons, include that many detail tables, let's say make 2 or 3 columns, whatever it is, modify all of this. And when you save it, your particular theme or page style will have this copy. So you can create several instances of the same page style with different settings, so that when you use it, you immediately have all your predefined settings. Now, when you create copies of the style, you need to name them differently, obviously. Maybe you just name them such as, I don't know, Saturns 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or you give your own name because you don't like the word Saturns and you like the word maybe, I don't know, my theme 1. Regardless of that, you need to give new name. So important thing that designer will not try to migrate your application if it discovers that in the design themes folder there is no theme with the same name. So let's look at designer folder right now. So let me switch to the Windows Explorer. Oops, a little bit easier to, okay, here it is. So this is the Windows Explorer. Let me go to installation folders. So there's program files 86, and there is an Iron Speed Designer. So for example, one of those, I mean, this is version 11, for example, right? We have here design themes folder. They are all design themes. Now, if you in the version 10.2.1 created a new theme and called it my theme, and you might create it by, usually that's, I suppose you will do, you will, for example, copy it in the version 10.2.1, one of the themes, and duplicated it with your new name. So you duplicated the folder, renamed it, and maybe then changed styles, changed images. do the same thing in the new version. So if, for example, you, as I said, intend in the version 10.1 duplicated the theme Saturns and call it MySip1, then do the same thing. Go to version 11 or whatever version you migrate into and duplicate the same theme. Literally, right-click and create a copy and then paste. So duplicate the theme. And when you did it, it of course in the new version, because you duplicated it in the new version, it will get correct version numbers in all the files. But then you need to merge it with your original theme, because right now when I literally copy it and paste it here, that's how I duplicate it, right? Continue. It will create a copy of it. Well, obviously, even if I rename it as MySip1 right now, or for the simplicity of it, I will rename it something like this. Of course, it doesn't have your images or custom styles which you modified in the previous version. So after you did that, you need to merge them. You basically, literally, I suggest, by the way, to use this amazing software. You can have a better version, or you can buy the license called Buy On Compare. I really like it. It's very convenient to compare folders and files. But the bottom line is that after you created a copy of it, you copy from your older theme CSS files and image files. Do not copy any XML files. There are two reasons for that. Well, first of all, they would have wrong version, and it won't fly. Designer will refuse to use it. And second, we from time to time modify them, and that's the process of migration, where actually these templates are modified for the reason they replace with your old one because we want to fix a bug. So you're not supposed to modify actually XML files, and we always say so in the design theme folder as well, because well, otherwise, when you migrate, the new version will override it anyway. And so you copy only CSS files and only image files over. You can literally copy them over and replace them. After that, you prepare new Designer for the migration of this theme. So basically now your new version of Designer is aware of this new theme name, and it's able to replace files when it's needed. And after that, you might start migration. Now, this is a separate, very empty slide with a very important message, and I wanted to kind of stress the importance of this message. You have to migrate in a test environment. Never, never, never migrate in the production. And that relates to both application and database. Well, the application is a bit more obvious. You don't want to migrate a running application, although we had such cases, believe it or not, when people actually tried to open a production deployed application and migrate it right there on the production server. And of course, it breaks everything, obviously, and suddenly your people can't see anything, there are errors and so on. You don't want to do that. You first make a backup, you migrate, and then make sure application runs, and only then you deploy it again. But it's also important not to use production database. Well, if you use inline code, it's actually not as dangerous, because inline code does not change the database at all. But if you store procedures, the migration process includes schema synchronization. Schema synchronization will generate store procedures. And even if it doesn't do automatically, you need to click Regenerate Store Procedures button. You have to do that anyway. Because after schema synchronization, especially in new versions, store procedures could be different. You might want to reapply your customizations if you customize the procedures, but that's a portion of migration. You do not want on the your running production application suddenly stop running just because your store procedures changed. So migrate application in test environment. If you don't have your test database handy, just simply generate schema for your existing database and create a new, or make a backup file, which is easier, and restore it on some test server. If it's a huge database, generate a schema script and create database on the test server. Now, again, we have not started migrating Wizard yet. Before we do this, we need to synchronize schema and rebuild application. This is important again, because very often the schema getting changed, and sometimes you don't even know it has been changed. Your application is running, you don't touch your application, and somebody else, not you, the database administrator, for example, modified like the schema, created new indices, or added some fields, etc. And your application doesn't affect anyhow because, well, if there are new index, your application will still run. Maybe it won't take advantage of the index, but it will still run. If you add new fields, application doesn't know that, it will still run, and so on. However, migration is more sensitive to that because it also, during migration, we need to rebuild business and data access layer. So we go to database to retrieve certain information. Sometimes, as I mentioned, we change the way how we generate schema. So we need to, if your schema hasn't been synchronized, it could cause problems during migration. And it could be different problems, difficult to fix. So our advice always, before migration, is make a full synchronization of the schema, accept all the changes if it's necessary, and rebuild your application. Rebuilding the application is actually important because if there are any errors, these errors will pop up during migration as well. But I will talk about it a bit later in a second. But important is to synchronize schema, rebuild the application, make sure there is no errors after you rebuild it. You would need to repeat the same procedure after migration. I will return to that back again. But when you migrate the application, migration visit is done. Again, go synchronize schema again. Very likely, most likely, 99% of a chance, you won't see any changes, but still do this. And sometimes when we changed the logic in the data access layer, it has to be done because it needs to be regenerated. And migration by itself does not synchronize schema. For example, just as a for the sake of example, when we introduce specific changes to the quick selector, we introduce the logic that quick selector is not generated until it is needed. Now, if you migrate the application and certain page needs quick selector, you would need to generate it. Well, we migrate the application, most likely it won't happen. But for example, we also added certain pop-up pages which also generated on demand. And this demand might happen for your migrated application. So you need to rebuild the application after your migration. So again, remember, synchronize application before migration, rebuild before migration. After migration, synchronize again, rebuild again. Now, switch to layout editor. I just mentioned that to make it easier, and then start migration. So let me go back to my designer. It will ask you to create a backup. Yes, sure, create a backup. Let me make a backup, backup 3 or something, just in case. And then click next. It will create a backup right now. So we'll just wait until it's finished. It might refresh UI a couple of times. It still has time to copy everything over. And then when the backup is created, it will tell you that, okay, I am ready to migrate right now. So here is ready. And it says that it will migrate your application, all this type of things. You click next on this. It will go through the migration of perform all the actions you set, and then you go next, and then it's finish, and you click finish. Before finish, look at that link. This link actually goes to exactly the same page as I have been showing you before. It just will open in the special window. This is migration notes, which is the first chapter, and then all the migration for every version. That was exactly what we have been talking before. So this is migration notes, and then we click finish, and everything is done. This is your new application. After you did that, you go and you again, you need to synchronize your schema tools, synchronize database schema, synchronize it. Very likely no changes will be found, most likely, but still do this. And then after you did that, you build all application. Very likely, if you did everything correct, there would be no errors, but you notice that all the files are getting rebuilt because they are regenerated. As I mentioned, all the code files are regenerated. So all control files, code behind files, ASPX files, all of them, business layer files, data access layer files, all those files which start with the base word before the name getting regenerated. Then its application is getting compiled, and it's finished, no errors. We can go to live preview and see how application runs. So let's navigate here, and hopefully it all was good, so you don't see any error over here. I'll give it 1 second. But of course it was easy case because I migrated from the previous release, and that's what I will mention now, why it is important. So, okay, all good, we are running. So let's jump back to the presentation. That's what we just went through. Now, as I said, you will be redirected to the help if you click on the link, or you can go to online help, click application migration version 9, and look to the notes here. Now is the time to apply, as I said before, all your customizations to any of the pages which have been replaced or removed. And by doing this, you will kind of ensure that your customizations work properly. Also, note that certain things will not be allowed. So, for example, we mentioned in our help on our website that we only support from version 6.2 and later. And in fact, in version 11, if you have any of the pages which has been created before 6.2 and never regenerated after this, it will refuse to migrate. So basically, what to do? You need to migrate your application to some later after 6.2 release, and then go to those pages and slightly modify them. Because in most of our releases before, it's not the case now, we changed that, but before we tried to not to touch the page if you didn't touch them. So for example, you have old page created in the version 6, and you never touched it at all. You migrate your application to 7, to 8, to 9, but you never touched the page itself. Well, this page would be preserved as it is, and now you won't be able to migrate it. So what you need to do is to migrate your application, or open if it was migrated in some of those intermediate releases, let's say 9 if it was the latest one. Go to this page and do something. By do something, I mean like drag and drop label and build, or delete them after this, or move it around. Make any change which will require the page to be rebuilt. Then it would be migrated and rebuilt. Then you can migrate to the version 11. So do some change. And again, read migration notes and apply your customizations. One thing is we always say, and I repeat it again, all your customizations on the generated file, such as control file or code behind file, has to go to section 1. In terms of business and data access layer, section 1 is actually the file which has the name of the table but not the base. So for example, customer record is basically whole section 1, but base customer record is actually the whole section 2. You should not put your changes into the base customer record or base customer table, but only into the customer record or customer table. We, during migration, do not touch the section 1. However, by do not touch, I mean we try to preserve it. But you see, if it's not a separate file like in the business layer, but if it's the same file, just different sections, obviously we need to parse them. So we parse and we find out this is the section 1, and we try to keep it as it is. And what it means is that your customization will stay there. However, imagine that we completely, for example, if there were a lot of releases in between, we completely changed the code in the generated section. This new generated code will not take any effect because you overrode it in section 1. And whatever we did does not do anything. Now imagine that we added new control, for example. Let's say we added new order sort control, and you overrode, let's say, data bind method. If you overrode data bind method, the new data bind method will never be called. So any new set methods for any new controls we might add, like new sort control, for example, or something else, will never be called. And it could cause actually compilation error because the control is not initialized, because you overrode data bind method in section 1. So when you override the methods, you need to make sure that you override the smallest granulation of the method. So if you need to modify some label, override set this label method, not the data bind, or don't override, for example, the whole load method if it's not necessary. Because otherwise, certain new functionality which is generated in the code will not be ever called because you override the whole code method. So if you have this type of customization, look there and see if you suddenly get a compilation error on this page or it behaves weirdly. The first thing to do, comment out your customization and see if it suddenly Now, verify the signatures. We try to preserve the signatures even when we modify the methods, but if too many releases passed in between, the signature could also change. You might notice that I mentioned a lot of times that when there are many releases in between, you do this or that or that. That means that actually if you migrate application from release to release, it might go smoothly. Why it is so, by the way? The reason for that is that when we migrate, we use the current code. For example, there is a code to generate control and code behind files. There are other classes which generate SPX files. There is a code which generates business layer. But the code in the current, let's say 11.01 release, is the one which can generate the code for 11.01. But as I mentioned before, migration goes step by step. So if your application is version 7, we first need to migrate it to version 7.1. We do not have a code which generates classes for 7.1 anymore. We have only code for version 11. So we don't have a code which knows the up-in-for XML schema for 7.1. We didn't have a code which can properly deals with, for example, with certain other things in 7.1. So we try to preserve all of those steps, and we do go through them. And generally, a designer doesn't break. Migration will go. It won't throw exceptions. But certain steps which had to be performed for 7.1, when we migrate to 11, those steps will still be performed, but they might not be as efficient as they were when you migrated to release 7.1, because the code base changed. So some steps will be just skipped, although they might be important. So my point being is that when you migrate with less gaps between releases, it will go smoother with less work you need to do manually most of the time. So if you migrate from version to version and don't skip versions, it will be much less painful, or painless if you wish. Now, these are about the code customizations, and as I said, try migrate applications right after release. An additional advantage of it is that we usually extend support for everybody, even if you don't have support contract for any migration issues right after release, because we want everybody to migrate as painless as possible. So for very limited time, usually right after the release, we extend support for everybody for migration-related issues. Now, the last section is why application migration failed. In theory, if you performed all the steps I just mentioned, it should not fail. If you followed all those instructions, it will go smooth and nothing will happen. However, it happens sometimes, it does, and more importantly, as I mentioned like already 20 million times, we replace certain files and you need to reapply your customization, so never skip backup. Always make sure the backup has been performed, because otherwise you won't be able to reapply your customizations, for example, for the shared folder file which has been replaced. Most common cause why migration fail is that you, for example, didn't perform one of the steps I mentioned right now. For example, you did not synchronize the schema before and after migration, or you did not rebuild after each of those schema synchronizations. Or if you rebuild before migration and you see the error, never start migration. So if you saw the error, stop there. Don't try migration. Migration never ever can fix the problem if it was there. If you had the problem before, migration make it worse, not better. It never fixes the problems. It only make them worse. If you have minor problem during build, but the application still can run, it won't run after migration. This problem could be much huger, because during migration, we assume that everything is good with application. Our assumption when we merge different schemas, when we merge the code, when we update schema, etc., that at that moment, everything is absolutely correct. If something is wrong, all this stuff could go wrong. So make sure you don't have problem before migration. If you do, fix the problem first. That's important. again, as I mentioned, we try to preserve signatures, but over a long time, the signature could change. So if you see compilation error, first try commenting out your code in the section 1, and then rebuilding application again and see if it suddenly helps. You can uncomment it again, of course, back. But if this helps, then you at least immediately know that, okay, my problem in the code customization. So, and you can uncomment method by method to see where the problem exactly happens. There is one small, as of now, it's already a small known issue. The parser which we use, the third-party software actually, which we use to parse the code in section 1 for the code control files and the code behind files, has one small issue. If you customized and overrode in a section 1 property, you know, in C# there's a properties get set method basically, and you don't have any empty line or space between the get and set, so closing bracket is right before the opening bracket. This parser fails, it comments out portion of it, thinking that it is actually a comment. And it breaks the whole markup for whole page, including section 2 and everything. The fix to that is very simple. Before migration, you just add the space between empty line, and that fixes it. We fixed all other problems with the parsers, but I think this is still standing somehow. It just cannot see the space in between. Why it could comment out, by the way, is because when we migrate, we also check if the method, for example, sometimes in the section 1 you have the method, especially for the codes behind, which is called from section 2. Let's say we have methods for load data and so on, some event handlers. If we change section 2 and this method no longer there, we need to comment out this method in section 1. So we parse section 1 and see if the corresponding method which you override is still there. So that's why. And that's all I wanted to cover. And now I'm ready to answer your questions. And I have quite a few of those, so let me go through them. So question from Ming. I currently have version 9.2. How long do you think is the process to migrate to version 11? I do not have any customizations. Well, if you do not have any customizations, meaning you didn't write any of your code at all ever, then I would say that should be very short. All you do is perform the steps I mentioned. So if you have your custom theme, prepare the custom theme. If you don't have custom theme, then open application, synchronize schema, rebuild, make sure you have backup copy, make sure that you kind of didn't have any errors during rebuild before migration, migrate, and synchronize schema again, rebuild again, and basically that's about it. Everything should be done. There's not supposed to be any issues over there. But again, it's don't afraid to try. If you have backup copy, you have backup copy. Nothing really goes wrong. There seems to never be an issue with migration of an application. This is a question from Paul. Never been an issue with migration of an application that's under subversion, SVN, source control. Subversion doesn't log files and check them out to specific user unless you specifically do so. Can you comment on the use of subversion? Am I missing something? I've migrated application from version 7 to version 10.1 and being an migration. Well, if your source control does not make files read-only, then migration will go smooth, although the files will be completely changed, so you would need to literally check out almost virtually every single one of them and check them in, or merge somehow. But yes, of course, if your control system doesn't make them read-only, migration itself will go. All I wanted to say is that a lot of times control system makes certain files read-only, and that could break the migration. Question from Jim. When you regenerate schema files from database, will manual configuration settings, labels, PK, VPK be migrated? Yes, of course. We will preserve all of those. So yeah. Prashad question. Can we migrate existing ASP.NET web application not coded in the ISD to ISD? Of course not. Migration works only for application generated in Iron Speed Designer, and this is a very simple reason for that. The application, by understanding of Iron Speed Designer, is nothing else but set of the schema files generated by Iron Speed Designer, those XML files. It's not the code files, it's those schema files. The code that they generated. If your application has not been generated by Iron Speed Designer, you don't have any schema files, so of course you can't migrate it. After migration, do we lose the formulas that we specify in old application? Today's date equals now. So no, you don't lose anything you did using the Iron Speed Designer UI. What I mean is that if I go and specify any formula right here for initialize, this formula of course will be preserved because this formula goes to the schema file, so it will be regenerated. This is not a custom code. When I'm talking about customizations, I don't mean any of the changes you did through the UI, because any change you did through UI is saved not in the code, but in the schema. Schema will be just used to regenerate these formulas again from scratch. They will be copied over, they will be regenerated. But if you write your code in a section 1, this is not in the schema, it's in the code file, then it's a different story. As I said, section 1 will be preserved, but your new method, which could call our generated method, and generated method could change its logic, so your call will not do exactly the same thing as I have been doing before. And again, sometimes you override a method, and inside this method could call others. For example, if you override data bind method, it also calls all the set method, which are needed to initialize controls. Imagine that you added new control. Well, you see the problem. At first, I think you said I have to migrate through each version to make an application to the latest version. But now I understand I can migrate from older to newest only one step. Does I take correctly? Yes, of course, you can migrate in one step. I said that designer underneath the hood will perform migration to each of the versions in between. However, I also said that when the gap between old version and new version becomes too large, you might see that certain things getting not as smooth as you wanted. And then sometimes it's worth trying migrating from version to version in between. I'm not saying it definitely should help. I'm not saying it will help. I'm saying sometimes it does. Not often, but again, it depends on how big the gap is between. But no, you can of course migrate to the latest version immediately. Do we lose data access layer, business layer code after migration? No, of course not. As I said, in the business layer or data access layer, if you look at the code files, and let me show all files over here, files, and show all. There are two kinds of files. You can see base category file, this code, and the record, for example, and categories record file. So this is a section 1 basically. This file is where you put all your customizations. You never should touch these. If you put anything in the base categories record or base categories table or any other base file, of course it will be completely lost because this, as it says, this class is generated. It will be overridden. That's exactly what it is. It's every time it's generated when you build. But these guys, no, they are not touched. They will be preserved completely. In fact, those guys are not touched at all. They are just whatever it is. No code will be lost over there. I do not have a test environment. Our production database is the only database attached to Iron Speed Designer. What do you think I should do to migrate from 9.2 to version 11? First of all, if you use inline code, meaning that when you go to application wizard and you select it here, not the stored procedures like it is now, but inline code, then you can technically use connected to the database because we don't put any changes to database for inline code. But if it's stored procedures, my recommendation is to do the following. Before migration, go to database, generate scripts. Run those scripts on any other database server. Have your own local database server on your local computer. Generate your database over there. It might not have any data, but it will have the same schema. Then point your pre-migrated application to this schema. Synchronize with it. Rebuild the application. Then migrate. Then you will regenerate store procedures. By the way, if you use store procedures, you would need to not, and then maybe I forgot to say it, but after you synchronize and rebuild the application, also you need to regenerate store procedures after migration. Because again, as I mentioned, from time to time, we slightly changed our code. We can add some functionality such as concurrency functionality or something like this. So you synchronize schema, rebuild application, regenerate store procedures. It will load them again. So my suggestion to do this all on the test database, which could have just a schema, no data, and then you might compare the new store procedures with your existing one before connecting back to the production database. Otherwise, you're facing a risk of suddenly replacing your store procedures in the production database. We have few applications that are in version 5.1 and few in version 9.1. Which version would you recommend? What do I'm not sure I understand what I recommend. I recommend all of them, but the best one, of course, 11. Does a single migration help address both old version to latest 11? Will they have few customizations? I personally would first recommend to migrating 5.1 to 9.1, then touching each and single page in this application to make sure all of them are regenerated in version 9.1 and then migrated to 11. In fact, version 11 does not support version from 5.1, it won't do it. Moreover, version 9.1 doesn't migrate to 9.1, 5.1 will not migrate to 9.1 smoothly or anyhow good at all. The thing is, in the version 6.2, we changed completely our schema. In fact, we created our current schema for ISPX pages in the version 6. Version 5 did not have it. What it means is that we will completely regenerate your page from scratch. Well, in fact, I would say easier to create it from scratch than migrate, because we will create your pages from scratch, literally from scratch. Nothing will be preserved. There is nothing to preserve. We changed completely the schema in version 6. That's why, and 6.2. That's why I'm always mentioning, you can't migrate from version before 6.2. You can try migrating 5.1 to 9.1. Your application will become new application eventually, because we will regenerate all the pages. Well, you will have the same page names, same tables, and maybe even some same columns. That's basically it. But if you change anything, including layout, they would be changed. So migrating 5.1 is a bad option. I wouldn't touch it actually. I have applications in the Iron Speed version 8.02 that contains custom queries. I read that those are no longer supported. How can I go about migrating my application to version 11? You can migrate to version 11. So by not supported, what we mean is that if it is there, it is there. The application will still run, and it will still use your custom query. You cannot modify it. You can't create a new one. But if it's already existing query, it will still use it. But you can't modify it. You can't open it in the query wizard and do anything about it. If we need more help on specific migration details, where can I reach to? There is such thing as the support. That's usually where all the questions you need to address. If you don't have support contract, we recommend to buy support contract. It's very useful. And as I mentioned literally a minute ago, several minutes ago, right after release of the new version, you can open a support case regarding migration, even if you don't have support, because we really want all of you to migrate to the newest version as soon as possible and as smooth as possible. So we usually have like 1-2, I can't say, we never can decide how long, but 1-2 weeks after release of the new version for migration issues, we kind of open support for everybody to make sure you can move to the new version. kind of encourage you to go to the latest version because it's easier for us too. I mean, we do it not because we are so, good people. Well, we're good people, but we do this for really our own agenda. Our agenda is to have everybody using the latest possible, if it's possible. So we encourage to do this. Why? Because it's much easier for us, even in support, to help people on the latest version rather than in the old one, because well, everybody remembers what we did lately, and with the old version, people can kind of get forgetting what was different there. Not related to migration, but how come encryption decryption through formulas doesn't work for dates and money fields? Well, it's not related to migration, and we have right now a migration webinar, so sorry. After open support case, after migration, how does Iron Speed Designer decide which version of Visual Studio to launch? Simple. We try to preserve the settings of the application before migration. So if your pre-migrate application has been configured to launch Visual Studio 2008, we will continue doing so in the migrate application. Said that, before version 11 and 10.1, I think, we did not have ability to select Visual Studio. We actually was only giving you a selection of the framework. But for each framework, we had certain Visual Studio in mind. Basically, for the framework 3.5, it was 2008. For the framework 4.0, it was 2010. So we will continue using the same Visual Studio which was used before. Question from Hassan. How come every time I regenerate store procedure, I generate a new store procedure rather than overriding existing ones? No, we override existing ones. We do not generate a new store procedure. I'm not sure what you're referring to. They still have the same name, and they will generate with the same names. I can actually show you right now. Let me switch back to store procedures. Again, I'm using the procedures, so my store procedures right now. 1 second. Let me maybe go to the database. Actually, I might need to go to database to show that. Hold on. So here's my store procedures. Did I use store procedures or I didn't? I just migrate. I'm sorry. Maybe I need to rebuild. Did I just switch to the store procedures? Anyway, no, we generate the same store procedures with the same names, and we put them into the with the same names into the database. Oh, hold on. This is the access. I'm sorry. Of course, it doesn't have any store procedures. I need to switch to SQL Server. I'm thinking, what's wrong with it? I was just showing that store procedures click, but it's access database. There's no store procedures for access database. But if I go to my SQL Server, and I generated store procedures a lot of times. So here's my local machine, and if I will show you this Northwind database, you can notice that, for example, for my app 10, I have only one get list, only one get starts, etc. And there's no 5 of those. They're always the same. What was the name of the compare software? Beyond Compare. The name is Beyond Compare, 2 words. You can see it looks like this. This is version 4 I use right now. I have an old Iron Speed project, Iron Speed Designer project. How can I find out, by the way, Iron Speed is the name of the company. How can I find out what version it is for migration? Oh, it's very simple. Just go to the application itself. Let me do this. So, for example, the applications we're using right now for different versions right here. If I, for example, go for applications for version 9.2, any of them, we always have this up-info XML file in the beginning, always. So open this file in any editor. I prefer Pilot Edit, but any editor, Notepad, for example. And then just search here for the word version. Don't modify it, though, just search. Now, original version when it was upgraded, this particular application was 9.0.1, and the current version is 9.2. You can see here, original version, current version. That's how you know it. It's very simple. If an application was first generated, let's say in version 8.2, using an older theme such as Diablo, and by migrating to version 1, we would now want to take advantage of the new modern page styles. Can I provide demo or hints how to make this kind of change? Oh, very simple. It's impossible. That's the demo. We do not allow converting one family to another family. So if it was created in the classic theme, you have to use the classic theme. It's not convertible to new theme. Not supported. But the good news is now we have new modern themes with the grid layout, which is looks like classic but much better. Can you talk about security on Iron Speed Designer generated applications? Do I need to worry about anything on the out-of-the-box Iron Speed Designer generated application? I am using database user roles option. I'm thinking of sensitive business data. No, you don't need to worry about anything, but it's not related to migration, this question. So I cannot go into much details over there, but no, you don't need to worry. It works fine. Looks like I don't have any more questions at that point, and it's last call. If you have any question, put it in the next 30 seconds. If I do not see anything else coming, it's right now already 9:15. Oh, one question is coming. So if let me see what question it is. And again, please, today webinar is related to migration issues. Don't ask me questions about security, code generation, etc. I understand that you can ask me questions for hours and hours, but other folks, and we have quite a big crowd today, came here to listen about migration, so I'm not going to cover all details of different issues for hours. Can you show the new model pop-up? And that's exactly the example. It's not related to migration. And it looks like I don't have any more questions. So I might just go to some older application, meanwhile waiting for the question. And looks like one more question coming. Well, I'm waiting for this, and only because I'm waiting for this, I will show you the model pop-up. Okay. Give me 1 second. Actually, this is old application. Actually, to show it, I can show it on a Migrate application, or I need to create it from scratch. I can start the old one, but I need to restart my old application, which I don't even remember what it was. Hopefully, it was fine. So let me see. Okay, it wasn't fine because it's not configured to open the database, obviously. From the development server, so I need to create a new application to show it, or I can add the functionality to the Migrate application, actually. I can do that. And 1 second. Okay, I have Migrate application, but now I use the IS, and IS can connect to database. So I need to move database to the readable folder because it's in the wrong folder, or switch to development server. So I will switch to development server. And now I can connect to database because development server has administrative rights, and that's why it's easier to use. So now I can connect to database. Now look at that. If I click on this button right now, it will redirect a new page, and the page is edit categories. However, if I go and configure this button to open in a model pop-up, so all I need to do is to select the button actions. Actually, I need to make it smaller. You see, that's why I don't want to answer questions not related to migration, because now everybody will be looking at that for another 5 minutes, and I'm not sure everybody actually interested in this particular question right now. But I already started, so I can't stop. Now I say navigate to model pop-up, control to update is a category stable control, don't show tabs, click finish, OK, go to live preview, build the page, and then click a button. So we'll see it in a second. Meanwhile, I've got a last question, and looks like no more questions coming, so it will be the last one from Paul. Will you ever be able to allow our current application options to be migrated to new releases? Let me go this. So for now, you can see this is the button, and when I click it, it will open model pop-up on top of the page. That's what it is. You ever be able to allow our current application options to be migrated to new releases? I apologize if you already addressed this question. I was called away. I'm not sure I understand what does that mean. We preserve all the settings in the application generation options when we migrate the application, meaning that they are not overridden, they are the same, and they are obviously from your application will go to new release. If you mean, I think I know what you mean. You may be meaning that you save certain settings in the default file, which is wizard options, which is in Designer, and when you migrate to the new Designer, this file is getting replaced. Well, guess what? Version 11 changed all of this picture. Because now, when you open your application, when you're migrating, we will preserve your option in Open4 XML. And then, if you change any option over there, or just open it and click Finish, actually change anything, it will save these as default to wizard options in Designer in this particular theme. By that, you can quite quickly save, you basically need to save all the sections which you modified, but then by doing this, you will update your wizard options in the theme, and it will have the new settings over there. Yet again, as I understand from what you're kind of saying right now, if you're talking about changing in the set of in Designer, not in application, then the way to deal with it is to migrate application and then simply open up wizard options and save different sections. It will save them into the theme, and it will be sitting there. Of course, when we migrate theme, this thing will be replaced. But and this is what I mentioned today, and that's exactly answering your question. You can always copy this thing for the older theme from, well, basically, how to say it? We do not have migration for the Designer files. That's what it is. A wizard options Designer file. We only migrate application files. But now it's very easy to save it back to Designer. That maybe solves the problem at least halfway. Oh, one more question. Another question is, does that mean you could copy a theme and have a different application settings? That's exactly what I meant. Now in version 11, every theme has different application settings. It has them by default when you generate application, and you can modify them independently, because now it's actually, if you look at that, just to go back, if you look at Designer folder of version 11, I stopped too far away. Where is my Designer? Hold on. Let me find Designer. It's not Designer, it's users. I need to go to program files 86, Iron Speed Designer. So version 11, all of them now behaves like this. You can see here design themes. In design themes, if you click on any theme, doesn't matter which one, I prefer vines, but you can go to mountains as well. Inside the theme, you see wizard options, and this file is unique for every theme, so they're independent. And when you save options, you update this file for this particular theme. That's why I said now you can create a bunch of templates, and that's one of the features I really personally like very much, that I can create separate templates like Chardonnay 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with different sets of options. And I don't have any more questions now. Looks like nothing is coming. So I thank you all for listening to me today morning, and I really hope I helped you a bit, or at least give you some guidance how to have less pain but more fun. And migration should be fun, rarely so, but I hope with some advices I gave you today and some explanation on how it works, it will make it easier. So thank you very much, and goodbye.